Hello, my name is Mark Sommerfeld, and today we're going to build this door right here. It's a brand new door that we have. We're going to offer. It's a mitered raised panel door. And to do that, we're going to use our tongue and groove cabinet making, the Pro set. When the Pro set is our regular tongue and groove set, but it also features this long molding bit. Okay? It used to be that when you make a door like this, you'd have to go out and buy some expensive molding like this. But with that long bit, we're going to create our own molding. Okay? Now, to do that, this is probably the longest bit made, longest router bit made. And what you want to do when you set that bit is you want to set the bit right there. There's a little curve, little radius right here on the bottom. Okay? You want to set that so it's approximately flush with the table. So you can see we've already got it set right there. Okay. We're going to snug that up now with our wrench, and we're ready to go. Now, most people with their, if you don't have our router table, I think our router table is about the only one that's going to work with this, but our router table is made especially tall. We made it especially for this bit. And what we're doing here, you can see, what we did is we even mortised out a little bit on the fence right there, so this bit is going to work with this fence. So our fence is going to work perfectly. Now, if you don't have a fence like ours, what you might have to do is put a sacrifice fence on the front. Just get a big chunk of wood like this and get it a little bit taller, and then cut out your opening in that chunk of wood and have that fastened to your fence. It's called a sacrifice fence, and you can get by there. Okay. Well, our fence is going to come over here and drop into our pivot point. And you can see how it pivots. Now, when we're cutting, what we're going to do first is we're going to take our stiles and rails here to make this door. Okay, here's our two stiles and here's our two rails, and they're going to be eventually cut with miters in them. When you cut these, if I want this door to be 20 inches long, we're going to cut it a lot extra, about 28 inches. Cut it 4 or 5 inches extra long. So when you cut it, you can always come in there and cut those 45s. Okay, so we got our pieces cut to the right length, and on the width of this, when you're making a mitered raised panel door, you want to at least make it, the minimum is 3 inches wide, okay? 3 inches. And you can probably go up to about 3 1/4, 3 1/2. I wouldn't go much wider than that. But it has to be at least 3 inches to encompass this. All right. Now, when we're cutting this cut, we don't want that bit making the full cut. So I'm going to press it way up here, and we'll just take a baby cut to start with. And we're going to take and pivot that fence back to the bearing. And it might take 2 or 3 passes. Make 3 passes to make it nice and easy for yourself. And when you're running that bit, the first 2 or 3 passes, run it around medium speed, 2 or 3 on your router. When you get to the final cut and you're taking not much off, then you can turn the speed of the router up just a little bit to get a smoother cut. Now, before we make this cut, a lot of guys would do this. When they're cutting something like this, they'll come into here and they'll set up a series of feather boards to hold that board against the fence, and a bunch of feather boards maybe locking into here, pushing down. You can if you want. Well, what we did, we make it a simple push block. What we have to do is push that board in, push it down, and push it forward. Okay, we've got a block of wood right here, a big block of wood. That board is going to go against here, and it's going to push the fence towards the fence. This board, you can see we put on top, and that's going to press down. And we purposely made this here short enough so that we can get pressure going down. The last piece on the back now, you can see that backer on the back, that is going to push forward. So what we're doing with this, with these 3 pieces of wood, we're pushing down, pushing in, and pushing forward, and it makes for a very safe cut, you see, when we're cutting through there. Okay? All right. So we've got a small cut there. We're going to put our router into work. Okay, you can see we've made that final cut there now, and we're just taking off just a little bit. Now we're going to move that fence back and make a little bit bigger cut each time. Okay, we're going to move it back about right. Let's take it about right there. Okay, now we're going to run all 4 boards through again. We're starting to make that hump in the middle there. We're making a little bit. Now we're going to probably take 2 more passes for us to do. We'll probably take 2 more passes to get a nice smooth cut. The less cuts you take, the less you take each time, the smoother the cut's going to be. So we'll come in here and make our cut here now. Okay, you can see we just about got all of our shape here. This piece right here is not quite rounded. Our last cut now, we're going to get that bearing and that fence lined up. So we know it's going to be our last cut right here. That bearing is going to come back right even with the fence. And this will be our final pass. Now, to get a smooth, to get a few of these chatter marks out of here, we want to turn the speed of the router up on that final little pass. So let me turn the speed up first. See, we got a full radius on this little hump right here now, and the bearing is running here. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we have all 4 pieces of our mitered raised panel door cut, our 2 stiles, and our 2 rails here. The next thing we're going to do is take these over to our table saw, and I'll show you a neat way to cut the miters. Okay, we're over to our table saw. Now, here's our 4 stiles and rails, 4 pieces to our door. What we have here is a sled, and to cut those 45s. Now there's a lot of different ways you can cut a 45. On a chop saw, miter saw, very inaccurate. They have a lot of these sleds on the market that have the moving arms, you know, and you can set it to 45 exactly, but you got margin of error setting there too, you know. The best way I've ever known to cut a good 45 is with a stationary 90. This is a stationary lock 90, and you're going to get a perfect 45 every time, okay? It's great for cutting 45s. And another reason why is because we have 2 tracks on this sled that really keep it solid and stationary going through there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take each one of our sides, we're just going to cut the right-handed side on each one of our stiles and rails. Right like this. Okay, we've got the right-handed side cut on all of our stiles and our rails. Now, we're going to cut the other side. Cutting this side was easy because we didn't have to be accurate. They're extra long. Now, the door we're making today is going to be 12 inches wide, and it's going to be 20 inches long, going this way, like this, okay? 12 by 20. Now, you're not going to understand what I'm talking about right yet, but we're going to make this one here, instead of cutting it 12 inches, we're going to cut it 12 and 5/8 inches long, okay? From here to here, 12 and 5/8, because we're going to lock these two pieces together with a tongue and groove, which you'll see later. And that tongue is going to extend out it's going to have to account for 5/8 of an inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and measure 12 and 5/8 now on these two pieces, on the two tops and bottom rails, right here. Okay, there's my mark, 12 and 5/8. Okay, now what I'm going to do is bring this up, and you can see my mark exactly where it's going to go. I'm going to bring that up and line it right with my saw. So I'm cutting off right there. Once I have that, we have a little stop gauge built right into here, slides up. We'll clamp her down. Now we're going to have the top rail and the bottom rail cut exactly 12 and 5/8. Okay? So I'll back this up and we'll cut the top and bottom rails. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing with our stiles, but we're going to make that 20 inches, remember? So we're going to cut this out 20 and 5/8 inches. So (20 and 5/8) is right there. Okay, so now our sled has to move, our stop has to move down further. It's lined up right, we want it right there. Our stop comes in right there. And we're going to cut our two stiles. Okay, you can see now we have the stiles and rails cut for our mitered raised panel door. Now, to be able to lock that together and secure it really good, we're going to go back over to our router table and we're going to cut tongues and grooves on each one of these members. All right, we're ready to cut our tongue and grooves. Now, one thing about it though, when we were cutting this molding right here with this molding bit, you can see, you know, right there is how I had it set, okay? And if you look real close here, on the bottom edge, right underneath here, this little lip right here, you can see where I cut right there on that edge with my little finger right there. See where I'm cutting that little mark? Okay, what we want to do is we want to set our groove cutter right here so that that groove cutter corresponds right underneath that little mark, right like that. Okay. So, To do that, another way you can do it, if you don't want to set it that way, is use our trusty easy set, okay? The thickness of the wood we're using here is 13/16. And all you have to do with our easy set, it does 8 different bits, start at the star and go to 13/16, okay? All we do is pick out our tongue and groove. We come right into here, and you can see we've got our easy set, sets our bit perfectly to the right height. And all of our sets, once one bit is set, the other one's automatically set, so we can drop the tongue cutter in there and we're ready to go. Now, we're going to set the tongue cutter in there first because we want to cut the tongues on our mitered raised panel door first. Okay, we've got it locked in. We've got our insert ring set locked in. We're going to bring our fence over now and get our fence so we are flush. Oh, we got the wrong insert. Okay, we're going to change inserts now. And we're going to use the same insert that we used for our miter door. It's wider. And we're going to lock it right here into our hole, our pivot pin, right there. We're locked in here. Our fence has to be flush with our bearing in the middle, right there. Lock it down. We are now ready to start cutting the tongues. Okay, now, when we start cutting the tongues, what we're going to do is put the good side down and we're going to cut our tongue. And when we do that, we're going to use a push block like that. And what that does, we got a right angle push block right like that. And we're going to cut our tongue right there. Okay, we've got all the right sides cut, all the left sides, excuse me, cut with our tongue. Now we're going to come over here and cut the grooves. Now, notice that I put the good side down, and everything we do, we always put the good side down. And the reason we do is because when you put that good side down and everything's referenced off that good side, you are always going to be flush. Your fronts are always going to be flush. If your pieces are off, you're going to be off on the back. And the reason we can put the good side down on all these bits is because all these pieces, because when we put this bit in here, when we designed this bit, we designed it so that this edge here with the bearing rods and this little hump right here are on the same plane. Exactly, see? What that does, that allows us now to cut the good side down and everything is going to be perfectly flush in the front. All right, we've got the tongues cut. The next thing we're going to do now is we're going to change bits and put the groove cutter in, and we're going to cut a groove that will match that tongue. And again, you know how easy it is. All of our bit sets are like this. All you have to do, pop that tongue cutter out, put the groove cutter in, and we're ready to cut the groove. Okay? And again, all we do there is bring our fence in and get that fence flush with the bearing. Now we're ready to turn the pieces around, still the good side down, and cut our grooves. When we do this, we're going to use a push block that's the opposite, right like that. So we'll come in there and cut our 4 grooves. Okay. Okay, we got all of our grooves cut, and you can see when we go through here now, we're stopping a little bit shy because we don't want to burn all the way through and create a hole there. You can see I'm stopping just a little bit shy. Have a little mark set. I use my ring here on my insert ring. So stop shy on all those grooves. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to cut the groove going this way on all 4 pieces where our raised panel is going to stick in. So we're going to take these pieces again all through and cut that groove for our raised panel at the same setting. Okay, now we've got all the grooves cut for our raised panel and for our tongues to fit into. We're ready to assemble the door. And you can see right there, though, that our door it's going to fit nice and flush here, but we have too much tongue here extended. So we got to eliminate some of that tongue. And right now, you can see why, if this door is going to be 20 inches long, why we made it 20 and 5/8, because we have 5/8 extending here. Even though we're using 1/2 inch engagement, since that's cut at a 45-degree angle, it creates a 5/8 inch extension there that we got to allow for. So that's why if you're making your door 20 inches, you cut it 20 and 5/8, and then when it goes together, that 5/8 of an inch will be hidden inside that tongue and groove. All right, so let's take that bit out, put our flush trim bit in it, and eliminate some of that tongue. Okay, we've got our flush trim bit set in there, and we're going to put our small insert ring here now with our spanner wrench here. Lock this, and we're locked. Now, we got to set the height of the bit. When we cut this tenon off now, what we're going to do is, this is one of the very few times that you can put the bad side down, because we're not really matching up anything, we're just eliminating something. But what we want to do is lower that bit so that the bearing is riding on this shoulder right here, and that we're cutting off some of that tenon. So very easy to switch bit, the height of the bit. We're just going to bring it down about right there, lock it in, and we're ready to cut. When I do this now, I'll do it freehand. I'll just come in here and put the palms. I don't come in here like this. If you put your palms on the table, you got more control, and we'll just kind of chisel that thing off just like that. You'll see how it works. Very easy. Okay, now you can see if you chisel off enough right there, eliminate enough, your tongues and grooves should be perfectly matched right there. And if you got a good snug fit, you might want to get a little hammer them together, but I think we can get it right there. And there's your perfectly matching tongue and groove right there. We'll just, right there. Okay. When I got that perfectly lined up, you can see I might have a little bit of a crack in there, see? So what I might have to do is I might have to come back in there and eliminate just a little bit of that shoulder on that tongue. So let's do that. Okay, now we're going to come into here, and now we've got that perfect fit. Okay, So make sure all 4 corners fit, dry fit them all up. You've already cut the groove for the raised panel, so the next thing we're going to do now is put our OG raised panel cutter in here and make our raised panel. Okay, we've got our door put together here, and you can see how we can create some perfect miters with that sled we used earlier. It really works great. Now, what we're ready to do next is make that panel in the middle. How do we arrive at the dimensions? I'll explain how we do it. If the door is 12 inches wide, and you have 3 inches here and 3 inches here, you just take 12 minus 6, and that gives you that opening of 6 inches. But our tongue and groove joint in here, the groove is extended in a 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch on each side, so actually it's going to be 7 inches from the inside of that groove to the inside of that groove. So that's how wide our panel is, but we want to make the panel a little bit narrower, exactly 1/4 of an inch narrower, so it can expand and contract. So we're going to take 1/4 of an inch off of that 7 inches, and that gives us the final 6 3/4. Same thing goes up and down. 20 inches minus 3, 20 minus 6 is 14. Add the 1 inch there, you'll get 15, but we're going to back off 1/4, 14 3/4. Another way you can do it, let's say if you use something that's 3 1/4 or 3 1/2 out here, just your opening inside here, you can just measure your opening and add 3/4 of an inch, and that'll work also. Okay, so we've arrived at the size of our panel. Now, we're ready to start machining that panel with our raised panel cutter. Now, a lot of guys, when they're doing this, will make that raised panel stick proud, okay? They might like to do that. You can see how we got the panel on this one here sticking proud. See, it's not flush with our stiles and rails. On all of our other doors, we always make them flush because they're flat surfaces, and you can sand that whole door with a random orbital sander or run them through a big wide belt if you want. But with this door, since you can't sand this anyway, we might as well stick that panel proud. That's the way I like to do it anyway. So we're going to stick our panel cutter in there accordingly. Here's our panel cutter, and the panel cutters come with a big bearing and a small bearing. We're going to install, it comes with a big bearing on it. So take the big bearing off, install the small bearing. The big bearing is for when you're doing arch doors only. Okay, so we got this OG cutter set in our router, and we like to use the OG. You can use any panel cutter you want, the OG or the Cove. With this fancy door we're making here, a lot of people like to use the OG cutter. Snug this up a little bit tighter to get started. Okay, we're snugged in and ready to go. Now, you can see I've raised that up quite a bit right there. That's where I want it. I'm going to bring my fence over. Drops into my pivot point, and right there's my bearing. Right there. Okay, that's going to be my final pass. I want to make this in 2 passes, so I'm going to bring that fence out just a little bit right at the panel cutter, maybe a little bit. I'm just going to have that panel cutter make a little bit of a cut for my first pass. And remember, when we make our panel cuts, always again, good side down, we do the in grain with the grain, in grain with the grain. Always want to finish up going with the grain. Okay, we're going to slow the speed of that router down here first. I know we're on the high speed end there. These are our push blocks. There's our first cut, right there. And actually, if you got that panel cutter just barely hitting the back and not showing on the back, it makes a nice drawer front, matching drawer front. But we're going to move it back now and hit that small bearing and make our second pass to make our panel. Right there's our small bearing. Lock it in, we'll do the same thing over again. Okay, there's our finished raised panel. Now we're going to go get that mitered stile and rail and show you how we install the two. Okay, here's our stiles and rails right here. And you can see we're going to put these together like this. And we're going to stick our panel in here and glue it up. Now, before we do that, we use these little panel line strips. And what these panel line strips do, they allow, we're going to stick 2 of them in each stile and 2 of them in each of the rails, okay? And what they do is they allow that panel to expand and contract evenly and always keeps the panel centered right in the middle, okay? So I wouldn't make a door without these, personally myself. Okay, and we need them on the 2 stiles for expansion contraction this way. The reason we're putting them on the top and the bottom is wood cannot expand this way, but we put them on the top and the bottom and make this smaller just so we have the same reveal all the way around the door. Okay, we're ready to take it and stick that panel in there now. And when you're actually gluing this up, I'm doing a dry clamp here. When you're actually gluing this up, when you glue these now, what you want to do is put some glue on the back of that tongue, on the tongue, and a little bit on the front. And you can put in the groove on the back. Be careful when you're putting that groove on this top edge right in here, because it's really difficult when these come together to get glue out of that rounded area there. So we're going to come into here and we're going to put this, simulate, this is going into our clamps right now. Okay, when you take that thing into your clamps and you start clamping those joints together like that, okay, you want to have 2 clamps going here and 2 clamps going here. And you just keep tweaking those clamps both ways until all 4 corners are perfectly matched. And when you do, you're going to arrive at a door like this. It's going to fit perfect, right like that. Some guys like to keep that door just like that with that nice square edge. Me personally, I like to put a little round over bit and radius that edge after the door is glued up and sanded. So I'll show you next how we're going to radius that outside edge. Okay, we're ready to take and put that radius around the outside edge here now. And what looks good is a 1/4 inch radius right here. Okay, if I stick this bit into my router right where the radius hits like it's going to be, I'm not going to get much of a cut because remember I have that panel there sticking proud. You can even see on my table of rock here. You know, so if I have about 1/8 inch right here on this bottom edge right here approximately, I'm going to have to move that bit up, and so I have a little bit of that straight part of that round over coming up about 1/8 inch. So you got to allow for that cut. So we're going to bring it up about right in there. We should get a good radius. And you can see now that you can bring it over here, and I might be able to tweak that thing just a little bit more so that my round over is hitting right there. Okay. So we've got that round over bit set to the correct height now. Put our insert ring in. And we'll be ready to cut that radius. Fence is in my pivot point. There's my straight edge on my bearing. And we're ready to take and cut. And when you do this, remember, you don't want to, be careful. Don't let this thing rock. Just put all the pressure right on that raised panel and you can make your cut. Right there, you can see how nice that looks with that little radius on there. Really dresses that door up. All right, the last thing we're going to show you now is how we're going to install the 35mm hinges on the back. We'll do that next with our hinge jig. Okay, our door now, we're ready to drill the hinges. When we do that, what we're going to do is use our easy bore jig right here. Okay, you can see it's got 3 drill bits in it. A 35mm and 2 8mm bits. All you do is clamp that on the back of your door, okay? And I want it to be flush. I just use this little yellow portion out here, flush with the edge of my door, and I'll clamp it down right like that. Okay? Now, we have two little stops on the front here. And these two little stops right here, you can preset them for any margin of overlay. When we have them set on the number 2, that's for a 1/2 inch overlay. You turn them over to 3 and you got 3/8 inch overlay. So, and I always use 1/2 inch overlay. It's a lot easier for figuring and everything. We clamp it down with our 2 cam clamps and make sure you're tight here, lined up correctly here. We're ready to drill the holes for our hinges. And it comes with a socket. You just come over to here and drill the 8mm. They're spring loaded, automatically preset. The middle one is preset for our hinges, but you can adjust it. Our hinges are 7/16. You can see how quickly accurately you can drill the holes with this jig. It's a lifesaver. And installing that now, like I said, our hinge cups are only 7/16. You can adjust this stop collar, or these set screws right here, whatever you want to call them. You can adjust them down if you want a deeper hole, but I like the 7/16 deep hinges. All right, all you do now is just taking the hinges. You can see have these little nylon inserts. They're ribbed, and once you got them lined up, just take slight blows on the hammer and your hinge is installed that quick and easy. Okay, all ready to go. Now you can stain and spray the door. You can take those hinges off when you stain and spray and screw it right back on as many times as you want. So they're very easy way of installing the hinges on your doors with this. So we're going to go ahead and drill the other holes on the other side here. Clamp it down again. Drill the holes. This saves a ton of time when you're installing hinges right there. Okay, and these are hinges made for face frame construction, which we predominantly use in our shop. All right, one last thing we can do to this door now is we can drill the holes for our hardware, and we'll show you, we have a little jig to do that for you too. Okay, we're ready to put the hardware on, and I just put a little dot where I want the one hole to be, okay? And what we have to do is we have this little jig right here. It's called the Easy Mark. It aligns your holes just perfectly for it. All the way into the inside here, you are on 3-inch centers, okay? And that's what hardware we're going to use, a little piece of hardware, 3-inch. On a door like this, you can't get that big, heavy hardware because you're on a radius here. You know, you want that setting right there in the middle, like that. All right. Now, with that jig, we got it set for the 3 inches. Okay, this is a stop. And that stop, since we're lining up on this side, I'm going to move that stop to the other side. Okay? All right, like this. Okay. Now, what we have to do, you can see the stop on the back where I'm setting right there on the back, okay? What I have to do now is visually line it up with that mark I have. So I'm right in the center. And what I'm doing there is sliding this stop right here, my hole, where I drill my holes, so I'm lined up right where I want to go. And you might want to do some test holes for this to begin with. All right, I'm going to drill the first hole right there. So I'm going to put my stop right here. So if I do a bunch of doors now, I know right where to put that on, right there. Come right up to that stop, and all my doors are identically set, okay? All right, this system here, this little jig comes with a 6-inch aircraft drill, and these are hardened bushings. You're not going to wear them out. We just go right down through. And that easily and accurately, you just drill all your holes for your hardware. A lot of guys sit up on a drill press or anything, but this can be done after your doors are installed, and you know now that hardware is going to be lined up just perfectly right where you want it. All right, our door is ready to stain and spray, and you're ready to start installing. I've enjoyed working with you today, and I hope you enjoy building your new miter raised panel door.